I was
we are live. We went live. We've gone live straight away. Oh, after all our fiddling around, we are live.
Hi, all. We had some technical difficulties. Yeah, I pulled myself out.
Yeah.
And then I was able to take the same link. So that's
wonderful. So here we are in Art and Heart of Menopause, talking this week about PMS, premenstrual syndrome. Huge topic as usual. Chitra and I love to have huge topic. But seriously, but we're very excited to actually talk about this because it's such a vital thing to talk about. And of course, its relationship to perimenopause.
And menopause and everything.
Yeah.
I was watching a video from other women's perspectives in Ayurveda about it, and there was one doctor out of India who said this. They said, imagine half of your month being spent not feeling well. Well, that can be PMS plus your period. So, yeah, so half a month means half a year. The other half of the time you're spending is asleep. So how much time do we focus on this, and how much time are we? It's just not right. It's just not fair that we don't study this properly, that we don't don't attribute resources to it other than aspirin and bear with it or whatever it is that's being told.
Paper it over with hormones so women basically don't menstruate.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing about the logic of hormones, like birth control pills for PMS is that, yeah, so your period is controlled within certain days of the month, but the PMS doesn't go away. So it's not logical, but somehow we bought it.
Yeah, we bought it for a long time. And of course, it's women from about the age of about 14 till there's something around about 50 plus. So, it's not just half the year, it's half the year for about 40 years. Whoopee. I think so. I think we need a different conversation. But let's introduce ourselves, shall we, Chitra, before we get too excited and down.
Sounds like a plan. Big, we keep doing these big, huge topics, and eventually we'll narrow them down into something smaller. So my name is, I guess I'm going to start. My name is Chitra, and I write Art of Menopausing here on Substack. I'm a doctor of Ayurveda, and I specialize in women's health from peri through post. And my goal these days is to have people reimagine Ayurveda and reimagine menopause, because menopause is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. And I'm Clarissa. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner. I specialize in nutrition therapy and Qigong in all its forms. And I also work with perimenopause to postmenopausal women. And I write Heart of Menopause. And like Chitra, I think that there's a different way. And I think one of my goals here is to help women have much more self-sufficiency, to look inside themselves rather than to be always searching for an answer, because there's a lot of it's intuitive. It's in ourselves to know what to do. And we live in a world that wants to not let us trust our own bodies, trust ourselves. And so a lot of what I work with is to give you the power to really help yourself as much as you need it and have the intervention when it's really necessary, not as the default.
Yes. And to know when that intervention is needed, because with all this information that we have at our fingertips, it is so easy to go from a small adjustment symptom where the body is using its own intelligence to signal something, to major diseases like cancer and whatnot.
Yeah.
So yeah. Agree. And that was said. The cat, she's always around when Ayurveda is being spoken. She just keeps me in check.
Just in case,
Just in case.
Welcome to the people who've joined us, to Karen and to Philip. Nice to Paul, I think it was. We're glad to have you with us for this conversation. Very important for us to have another big topic. Gosh, PMS.
PMS.
Where shall we start?
I'm used to seeing those letters and going perimenopausal symptoms, but no, it's not.
No, it's premenstrual syndrome or symptoms.
Syndrome. And syndrome is an interesting word when it comes out of allopathic medicine. Whenever the word syndrome is put onto the end of a diagnosis, quote unquote, it means they don't know what it is, but this is a cluster of symptoms. And we don't have they can name the symptoms, but they don't necessarily have an actual cause and effect type. They have the effect. They don't have an actual cause. They don't know why things are going wrong. And from, I think, both the Chinese medicine and the Ayurvedic medicine, we can pinpoint to causes that go beyond physical testing, beyond physical limitations of measurement, which is what the allopathic system does.
I agree. And I think that the root causes here are many in terms of the imbalances in the body. But I think in PMS, we'll get to this conversation, there are a lot of external environmental factors that are really playing into this. And much from the Chinese medicine perspective, a lot of what is occurring in PMS is very closely mirrored to what we would say are some of the underlying imbalances in perimenopause and menopause. So I think for me, it also means that we too often in the West see perimenopause as something that parachuted in from somewhere. Suddenly I've got perimenopause, and it gets a little talked about. But actually, the underlying imbalances are there in PMS. So if we address them there, then there is a possibility, I'm not saying it's a given, that your perimenopause and into menopause transition can be smoother than it could be.
Yes. And that's the thing about change. Change can be extreme or it can be smooth, but no matter what, it's going to be change. So functions are going to be different, and then the components that go into those functions and the movement within that function, the stream has to shift. And whenever there's that kind of shift, there's always going to be some sort of uncomfortability or some sort of noticing. And quite often it's going to be a little more than uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be unbearable.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true. I mean, any change can have, because it's change, so it is uncomfortable. We don't really love change. We're not like, woo, bring it on, because we like to be wherever we are. But it doesn't, as you said, have to be jarring for us. We don't have to go through extreme suffering. But I think when we come back to PMS, one of the things is this has really ramped up in more recent time.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is one of the questions that sometimes doesn't get asked enough in the West. It's here. but it was a little bit there. For me, who's 65, yeah, there were some girls that were like that, but it wasn't 50% of women who felt these extreme moods, irritability, cramps, and pain. Yet that is now so common. So what is it that's changed in our environment that is behind this?
I think it may be even more than 50%. I think that data is old. I think that because it's become so normalized that it's glossed over, and so I think it's a lot more prevalent. I know for me, when I was young, and I think this is also the start of the changes of environmental intakes as well. So I started my period late in life. I was about 16 years old when that happened. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, that's because Vata was dominant in me. So Vata dominant people will have irregular timings. So it could be either very early or very late. And the length of the period would be it's also irregular for them. Whereas a Pitta woman might have it at the age of 12 and it's exactly, the cycle that they say you're supposed to have. And Kapha women are going to have it a little bit later, but not maybe like 14. They're going to have. So, when I came on board, besides not having any information, my friends who were having periods, they were having quite a few of them had PMS, but not to the debilitating space that's they're having now. But when I spoke to my mother, who didn't want to talk about it, she was like, she kind of did. It's like 5 minutes here, go figure it out. She said she'd never had any problems whatsoever. So for me, part of what happened was I started off with no PMS, but later on I started getting PMS symptoms. And at first it was like, I want to be like my friends because it's cool. I know, weird, teenage. And then I started actually having it, but also at the time, that was when the food in the United States started changing. So I remember going to having my first McDonald's hamburger, right? And that was a novelty and that was a special thing to do. And we were starting to go to restaurants more often. And for us as a family, what happened is we were basically eating a Mediterranean diet because that was that's our culture. And we started going more towards the American diet, started getting more processed foods, started getting more foods with chemicals in them. And so at that time, my menses also started to have a little bit of trouble. I only know that in hindsight. And there's no documentation about that, but I know that a lot of women my age started having those kinds of symptoms, but nothing like what is today, because it's a different environment for a woman of 12 or a girl of 12, excuse me, in 2025 than it was for someone in the 70s.
Totally. And I mean, for myself, I was Pitta. I was more Pitta. I think I was more Pitta when I was younger. And I began menstruation in the UK. I was 12. I had a mother who nosed into everything. She was highly involved. She was Swedish, so she talked about bodies very openly. And initially I had periods that were lasting a very, very long time. She was straight down the doctor. She said, this isn't normal. It's meant to be about 4 days. Why is the child having this? And I was taken to hospital with an appendicitis, and they opened me up and they found I had actually 4 small ovarian cysts. I'd probably been born with them. So they were removed, and my periods were then normal, typically uneventful. And of course, we were not a processed food country. Now, of course, the UK eats processed food like there's no tomorrow. But I grew up on an almost non-processed diet. And so I really haven't experienced these PMS symptoms in the time that I was menstruating actively. And then maybe a little bit, but that's perimenopausal towards the end. But I had pretty regular, uneventful menstruation. And I put a lot of that down to being in a lower estrogenic environment. I think Europe for a long time, but now, of course, diets have changed and toxic compounds in our environment. So I think that's not just the food, which we know in the US in particular is very high in hormones, and people eat a high animal diet. So there is a strongly, and that's changed in the generation. But I also think we have so much toxins, and I know that's for both of us an area. And so people not only have the estrogens, but we also have the xenoestrogens that are essentially fake estrogens, but they combine to the estrogen receptors in our body. And so we have a double whammy.
Right. And you know, I took this... today it's a lot more than that. And you know, I took this class on microplastics and nanoplastics.
Mm-hmm.
And that too is an estrogenic is an endocrine disruptor, meaning it's disrupting all of the hormones. And unfortunately, it's in almost every product we use, from toothpaste to, we're not even talking packaging, right? It's in the toothpaste, it's in the lotions, it's in the shampoos, it's in absolutely everything, including feminine products.
And the clothes you wear, like your underwear. And your sportswear. Oh.
And it degrades, and one of the biggest digestive systems we have is the skin, right? Which is why we need to be a lot more careful. So for women who are using commercially available tampons and pads, rethink it. You know, it may be a lot more difficult to go back to rags and other types of things, mostly rags, and making sure that they're cotton. Although, you know, there are silicone cups, and I don't know how much those degrade, but they may degrade a little less than the plastics that are inside the cottons of or the so-called cottons of tampons, right? So we may want to, you know, really rethink that, because as those plastics degrade, they go into the linings, into the tissues of the mucosal membranes. And from there, they're going to travel, and they're going to travel in a few directions. But if you're looking at the uterus, it's going to travel throughout the system into the ovaries. It may travel into the fallopian tubes. It may travel, we don't know. We don't know. There's no real studies. Actually, they're just now studying it on its issues on humans.
Yes.
And they're talking about male reproductive systems. You know?
Oh, brilliant. Let's talk about women's health for a change. But I do really, really think that these things are leading us to live in a high estrogenic environment. And so the body isn't able to make enough progesterone to counterbalance this. And this is what is going on the whole time. And then we give women, obviously, progesterone, which is not synthetic, so it's synthetic, so it's not quite the same as natural, but we're still not coming back into balance.
Right.
So, really that's part of it. And I did read something interesting in one of my Chinese medicine books that also we, as a society, view a lot of violence and quite explicit sexual content. And that actually affects our adrenals and also affects our other parts of our endocrine system. So that's a double sort of whammy on top of the things we think we know. That's also causing endocrine disruption. Sometimes I just have to look away because I can't watch these things. But we are feeding young people from an early age this because it's on mainstream TV, as well as what is on, goodness knows what's on children's phones.
So all of that, I totally agree. It brings up the actions of the mind, the emotions, and stress.
Yes.
So whenever we see violence, the body does not know the difference. The mind doesn't know the difference whether it's on the screen or it's in real life. So if it's not, so what's happening is the body starts creating scenarios where they can do the fright, flight, or flee situation. And then so that increases anxiety, fear, stress, and all of those things impact the adrenal glands.
Yes.
And that is one major problem with PMS. Problem for PMS, because when the adrenal glands are overly worked, and we get around to the time where the body is looking to shift its functions, on a monthly level, the adrenal glands are still looking for some sort of energy. And guess where they're going to go for that energy? They're going to look at the ovaries.
Yes. Yes.
So it's going to be drawing energy from the ovaries, and that's going to disrupt other systems. And that's a little bit about how I would like to view PMS and menstruation, because it's more than one system that's involved. Right?
It's multiple systems involved, multiple body systems that, when out of balance, isn't just one or the other, but they are compound. They're all together, and they're causing real disruption in the body. And that's what we're dealing with now, really, with people. But we're also in Chinese medicine. I mean, menstruation, menstrual blood is seen as sacred. And it had a sacred role. And I think to talk about, because when we understand, when we create these imbalances, what we're actually doing on a deeper level. And it was said that they even call menstrual blood Tian Gui. So it's not called blood, it's called Tian Gui, because it's gathering the emotions that you have in your various parts of your body together. It's mixed with some Jing, your essence, to come out of the body. So it's seen as an emotional clearance. But if you have too much stress, too much emotion, it's not working.
That is so cool, because in Ayurveda, we see the menstrual fluids as a higher octave of rasa dhatu. Rasa dhatu is the first portion of blood that is created after it's the white blood cells and the lymphatic system. But the interesting thing about the word rasa itself, there are two other meanings to it beyond the blood. One is it's music. It's a type of music. It's the flow of music, tempo, all of those things. But it's also emotions. The word emotion
is that.
So when we're flowing, when menstrual fluids are, we call it the higher octave of rasa dhatu. So if if rasa dhatu is formed properly, then not only do the rest of the tissues, the body tissues are formed properly if it goes through the appropriate channels, but also the menstrual fluids, the women's fluids, the women's reproductive fluids are also appropriate and well formed without anything to obstruct
Yes.
the channels.
Yeah. Well, Triangui means heavenly waters. So there is really that sense of sacredness around it. And I think that when we have all these imbalances and we don't see menstruation as sacred, because that's the other part of it, we've lost that side of it. And this was a time where women retired and rested and went through the process. And we have taken all of that away, and we just see it as time you just push on with, there's no downtime here. We are really adding a fuel to this fire. It's really become, and I think that's partly why the stress is high, and menstruation becomes a stressful experience as well.
It is. It's there's so many negative terms for it that it and we want to stop it altogether. Using hormones, and anytime we stop a flow, there's going to be damage to the environment. It's like putting a dam on a huge river, right? The environment around it is going to be damaged. And so the goal of Ayurveda and Chinese medicine is to have appropriate menses. For us, it's based on the appropriateness of it is based on whether you are a Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, and each one's going to have a slightly different way to have healthy menses. And those three doshas also are going to tell us how it's going to go wrong. What kinds of symptoms you're going to have, whether you're going to have a migraine headache or you're going to have lower back pain or major fatigue. All of these things can be divided into the various doshas. But for all of us, the idea is it's always going to be about flow. And whether it is flowing well or not. And in Ayurveda, we're looking at Vata, just like we did last week when we were looking at pain. We're looking at Vata again, and we're looking at downward movement.
Yes.
So anything that obstructs downward movement is going to potentially give us more symptoms. And that includes things like inversions, like going upside down and doing headstands in yoga. I remember doing that. I was like, damn it. I can do whatever I want during my period. It's good. I'm strong. I'm woman. Hear me roar. And so I literally would go upside down. And for me, that actually helped a little bit. But it helped a little bit because I think what happened was it pushed back a little bit on the flow to allow it to flow freely. But for the most part, we do not want to go upside down. You can lift your legs, but don't have the hips far up above the head. You don't want to do it that way because you're reversing the flow.
And there are qigong movements that you would be cautious of around some of the movements around the uterus in that as well to prevent excess bleeding, or if you have that. It's interesting because you've talked about flow. And of course, in Chinese medicine, it's really about stagnation and deficiency. And I think I feel like I say this every week, but it is. And it's about not only qi stagnation, which of course is there, but it's blood stagnation. And in Chinese medicine, blood is the mother of qi. So blood has to flow in the body for chi to flow in the body. So if you have a stagnation of blood in the body, you'll get a stagnation of chi too. And then again, it's related to a deficiency of chi, particularly in the spleen area. So we end up with tiredness, we end up with digestion, we end up with bloating when the spleen is not functioning. And of course, liver chi, we know that, breast tenderness, because you're here in this part of the area. And then we get the blood and chi stagnation. We basically get just discomfort, cramp, and pain. But it's a deficient and stagnant system. And it always has its roots back in things like stress and our lifestyle factors and our diet. They're always there.
And we're always talking the same things over and over and over again. And, in our society, we are so fortunate. We have an abundance of food. We have an abundance of most everything. And we have a relatively, and I hate to say this because I know that there are people who don't have an abundance of food.
Yes.
But even still, quite often the abundance of food is not the same as what they had back in China or back in India when we were hunter-gatherers. But we literally didn't have food until we hit the next phase, or if we didn't farm properly. Well, I mean, we have access to foods, whether they're real or not is a whole other story. But we have most of our diseases are diseases of too much rather than too little.
Yes.
And so that's why we're constantly going back to the same thing, because stagnation is because there's too much. We've blocked up. We've stuffed our organs. We've stuffed everything. It's just too much, and it creates a blockage so that the system cannot process it appropriately.
Yes. And I think when that is combined with the, shall we say, poor quality of food, we talked about processed food. A lot of women have very irregular eating habits too, and sedentary lifestyles. Sedentary lifestyles don't exactly encourage blood to flow. And we're not talking that people have to be out running and pumping iron in the gym, but we need to move and move with intention on a daily basis.
And the other thing about our lifestyles as women is that we have way too many responsibilities. So not only are we relatively sedentary, meaning we sit down a lot, but we also cannot take time off, from responsibilities. We don't have a larger nucleus of women or family members. We don't have the village to give us true time off so that we can just go inside and figure out what it is that we need to do, because all of these external factors are happening, but then there's an internal factor, of this change, and we have to learn how to pay attention to change, because if we don't pay attention to change and the intelligence of the body and the mind as it's going through the change, then the likelihood of us doing something wrong or damaging or excessive is great at that time.
Yes. Yeah. So it is what we said earlier about the tradition was women, when they menstruated, had 4 or 5 days where they traditionally were with other women, quiet, no childcare, no cooking, no farming, no sex, just quiet, reflective time, and then they could come back in. But also that we're constantly adapting through the moon cycle, and we're being obviously in tune with nature's cycle helps as well. But we then allow our energy to flow, because sometimes in the total cycle, it's more yang than it's more yin. And being able to adapt through our cycle in that way allows us to nurture ourselves the best we can. So when it's a yin phase, we maybe don't want to be running on empty, keep going, but pull back. When there's more energy in the yang phase and we're coming into the most fertile point, then we have more time to be up. But we're not that, because we're in a society that doesn't honor any of that. And we're meant to be 24/7, on the go. And it's not just physical, it's emotional, as you mentioned. It's emotional labor that never lets up for you.
So since we live in this society, there's not much that we can do to change it, to change the whole. I think this might be a good time for us to talk about what can we do and why we would want to do those changes. And so from an Ayurvedic perspective, there, as I mentioned, we've got the 3 doshas, and each woman is going to have her own symptom and the flow through the symptoms, or not. And, but something that we can all do together, because there might be pain or discomfort or change in and of itself is vata. So what we want to do is we want to calm the vata, and whether that is staying in bed a little bit longer, slowing down, having, warming teas and warming soups, all of those things will do it. But, we also need to have a slight cleansing factor to assist in the movement of the blood, of the menses. And so generally what I will tell women is to get some castor oil, which is a phenomenal thing. So many of us, now it's used for hair growth and eyelash growth and things like that. But what castor oil is, it's a very thick oil. And it's warming, and it goes deep into the system and helps draw things out. So toxins that are embedded within the tissue linings, they start getting scraped away in a way, so that the flow can happen. So if there's anything stuck, that's going to immediately bring a pain. And the way I do that for women is you warm up you do a castor oil pack on your belt, which is warming up the castor oil, taking a piece of cotton or wool cloth, none of the synthetic stuff, because that's going to go in. And then you can take a piece of plastic or not. Again, we're because people are, averse to having oil. I know, I can't get away from the plastic thing. And take a heating pad and put it on top and just stay warm with it. And the other thing that I say along with that is you can also take a little bit of an essential oil, like a lavender, or if you've got severe pains during menopause, you could use nutmeg. Nutmeg is an essential oil. You could use Vitex as an essential oil, and mix it a little bit with the castor oil and drop it into your belly button, because the belly button has all of the nerve tissues that goes out to all of these areas. So it'll calm some of those nerves a little bit. So that's something every woman can do. You can, although I would switch out the essential oil based on either your dosha or your symptom. But every woman can do that. And I would do it at least once in the middle of the period, and you can do it before, while you're having PMS symptoms. And you can do it, depending on how severe, you could do it throughout the month, like once a week you can do it. And you'll notice that even your sleep will get better, because of this warming, lubricating diffusion of the oil. Yeah.
And it's similar in Chinese medicine. It's very much the warming foods. You definitely want to stay away from the cold and raw. So we say that a lot, but that's true, because that's going to stagnate. It's not going to support the digestive system. I would also say that you want to feed the spleen a little bit with foods that are naturally sweet. So high sugar, no, but bringing in, like this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere, we have pumpkins and carrots coming in, not the dark root vegetables of winter, but these nice sweet earth-based vegetables. Apples are good. Some of this late stone fruits, they will be very supportive. They're naturally sweet, and we need a little bit of, love for ourselves here. And that is that we need to love ourselves through this time, nurture ourselves, and of course, resting when we can. But me, it's acupressure points a lot, and they are incredibly helpful, particularly the spleen ones, which are on and around the ankle. You will know if you touch some of those spleen points. You will know, and I'll probably put something in the notes on where they are, because I wasn't lifting up the leg and jiggling around. But they are on the leg, so they're very accessible. They are tender if that's an issue for you. Some women gain a lot of support from here on the heart 7, because there's so much emotion that's not cleared. So if we're feeling low, then the heart 7 point, which is about here, is wonderful. And both Chitra and I love David Crow. He does wonderful heart-based meditations in his program, which I thoroughly recommend women to pick up and do. They help to strengthen our heart, help us emotionally to be supported. And then always, other things like the kidney points between the toes or round by the ankle. And we want to be supporting these parts of ourselves. And of course, the governing and particularly the conception and Cholomai vessels, which are the gynecologically related to extraordinary vessels. We can also press certain points around the ankle and on our arms to support those gently. We're sort of strengthening that system. And we can do that. And is it not hard to do? We have access to this. And we can often feel a shift, particularly if we work with some of the vessels and simple points. You'll know where they are. You'll feel them quite strongly when you touch them. You won't miss them. You go, ouch, yes, I'm there. But in doing that, we're also releasing the stagnant chi that's there, so it can flow.
There is one point, or there are actually 4 points that are extremely helpful when I work with women, and those are at the kneecaps on either side of the knee, and you can literally feel the flow moving through, and it's like it gets stagnated there. And so I guess that would work. It's probably on the same meridian line as
they're probably on the same. Just below the knee is the Susan Lee point, the 3 Mile High point. That is a very good spleen point, and that is often a good one to move. You're a couple of inches, you'll know it, and it's a good one to press.
Yeah,
but that's in a similar space on a similar meridian to what you're suggesting.
So from an Ayurvedic perspective, and yes, we're also going to always say warming foods, be gentle. Rasa is a kapha, which is earth and water, and it's about love. So it is kapha. And so what we want to do is we want to strengthen the kapha so that it flows better. And so part of it is absolutely love. But when we're talking about perimenopausal symptoms, once we have discerned that the symptoms are there, we want to break it down into, is this for a Vata dominant woman? Is this for a Pitta dominant woman? Is it for a Kapha dominant woman? And that's when we will start shifting the various therapies that we might do for them, the various foods as well. So it's always going to be under this umbrella of helping Vata move properly and also nourishing Kapha. The Pitta part, because the red blood cells is Pitta, so we're really dealing with all three. But it, always,
Always.
always all three. But what we're doing is we're looking at the individual and saying, oh, okay, so for you, the symptoms have gone upwards, and perhaps you have a migraine. And so in that case, we would be looking at more cooling things and more opening of the vessels, type of situation. And we would say, oh, that's a pitta thing. If you start having lower back pains, more than likely there's a Vata situation happening, in which case I would take that castor oil and also put it on the back.
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
But we're always looking at easy to digest, warming foods, sweet foods, absolutely, but not sugar foods, because the sweet's going to supply kapha and it gives us a little bit of love, because these are the things that our cells feed off of. It's the sweet taste. The cell cannot do anything without the sweet. So so we start with a little bit of those things, but not the sugary things. Stay away from bitter and astringent foods, spicy foods, like overly spicy. So if you, this is even pre PMS, you might find that all of a sudden you are needing more chocolate. You are needing more coffee. That's the body screaming out to you that something is getting ready to shift. So that it's a bitter taste that you're looking for. So you're going to want to, rather than have it in concentrated like you would in coffee or chocolate, you may want to look for a bitter green or dark leafy greens. You switch it. That way you're supporting the liver as it's going through the change, but you're not doing anything extreme. And that's, I think, the point, is not to go for the extremes in terms of whether it's food, exercise, stress, TV watching, whatever it is.
Yeah. It's kind of giving the system some space, some stillness. And I think obviously in Chinese medicine, we talk about these major organ systems, but we also need to recognize that all of those imbalances are within the context of the constitution that you are. So how we approach that, if you're a wood person, if your constitution is more wood versus more water, will then be tailored. And then we lay season into that as well, because we have season of the year and season of life you're in. So, but we start with the imbalances, but they're always tailored to what your current constitution is. And of course, that can change over time as you go through changes in your life. Your constitution can shift. It's not fixed for life. And so you just have to make those adaptations, so that there isn't a blanket do this, do that sort of approach. It's where are you at in every aspect of your life. And the attempt is always to bring the body as much into balance as it can be, because it's always moving. But you're trying to create a sense. And the important thing is blood's flowing, chi's flowing, because otherwise that's when the body reacts. And I think that for me is kind of the backbone to it.
Right. And if it's not flowing, that's when we start getting symptoms. That's when we start getting diseases as well. And most of the time the diseases will start in the emotions themselves. And whether or not you honor them and those around you honor them or not, that's going to determine how much more the next time it comes around, how much more those emotions are going to flare up, or the fatigue. So unlike perimenopausal symptoms, where it seems like it's coming out of nowhere, a woman who is still having her menses can literally see a progression from one month to the next. And every month you ignore it, the more the body is going to start saying, "Hey, look at me," until it starts shouting, screaming, and then stopping you, to the point where the women today literally cannot get up off of the floor and they have to take time off from work.
Exactly.
Because they're
telling you that
in such pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you manage it and you start talking to the body and say, okay, what is it that I need right now? And we can use the sciences of Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine to say, oh, okay, so this is what I need right now, because we won't necessarily always know what we need. We might know from an emotional perspective, but we may not know from a food perspective if we haven't experienced those principles or know those principles. But it's always good to log it in. And the interesting thing is that we forget from one month to the next. We forget from 1 year to the next. So it's always one of the things that we always need to do when we're looking at the body and health is we need to observe and we need to write it down so that we have some form of system. Or actually, you can now, rather than writing it down, go into your notes app on your phone and just talk it in. So any system that you have to keep track of your moods, your foods, and whatnot, that will help. And of course, watching the moon, because the moon governs water, and water is a big part of blood and circulation and all of these other things.
Yes. And I think having, agree, totally coming into a much deeper awareness with our own bodies, and something that we're not connected into a lot of the time now because we're over busy and it's not in a culture. But moon cycles, and I've written about this, and there are particular moon cycle practices that you can do. They come from a more advanced inner alchemy system. So Qigong in many ways is the start of that. And this is the Neigong part, which is much more connecting to your inner self, to the cosmos. So you're a microcosm, the world that's a macrocosm. And it's that kind of relationship. And women who practice these moon cycle practices, and they're not, deeply complex. You don't have to be, they're very, very gentle practices. They build up relationships with their own body. They often have less severe symptoms. And that is also supported the more women live in nature. So women who live in natural environments often can quickly come into relationship with their moon cycles and find relief from these practices.
Yeah. That reminds me, early on I spoke about inversions in yoga, and the same is true in Ayurveda when we're looking at yogic practices. So there's a sun salutation, which everyone knows. Not necessarily the best thing for women to do during their periods, unless you're a Kapha woman. in which case you need a little support in the moving itself. But there's a thing called the moon salutation. So you literally are doing practices where you're bringing energy downward. So doing a lot of the strong standing movements are not necessarily going to be your friend during during half of the month. Half of the month, PMSing and your period. So, but you want to do things that are moving downwards, floor movements, sitting movements. Those will be helpful to you to help with the body to move things downwards. Also, those movements tend to be a little more relaxing. And so there's going to be less stress on the adrenal glands as well. So heading all the way back to the adrenals.
Yes. And the same with the Qigong. So you want to be practicing more of the women's type Qigongs, which are quite yin. They're very gentle and flowy like water. Whereas I would not be recommending women to go down the yin jing type Qigong. Fantastic practices for strength and yang. I do those in the winter months when I'm cold, because they kind of give you a bit more warmth, but they're certainly not what women should be doing in the height of their periods, however fantastic they are as practices, because they're just pulling up energy, and you want, as Clarissa said, down energy.
Yes, and that's exactly what we're looking for is down energy. So we've been here for an hour. Haven't talked to herbs, which is fine because it's a huge, huge topic. I am wondering if anyone in our audience has any questions, thoughts. Are you experiencing PMS? How can we help you specifically if you want to open up? And if not, that's perfectly fine as well. So I'll just wait a few moments, but I just wanted to say something that I have an offering out there, and it's a women's dosha quiz. And so this is based on current dosha of where you're at. So the doshas are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and what their ratio is. So this offering is out there. It's $25, and it's what happens is you'll fill out a questionnaire, and I will send you a 10-15 minute voice message, which helps tell you what the ratio is and what thing we can do to assist. So if you've got PMS, and that's your question, how do I reduce my PMS? Then that's what I will respond to and offer gentle yoga or food or herbs or lifestyle, whatever it is that's necessary to assist in that. Because PMS, like perimenopause, like menopause, is so individualized that, you can take an aspirin or Tylenol or whatnot to stop the pain in the short term. But again, it's short term and it doesn't come without other long-term issues later on.
No, and I think there isn't a quick fix, which is why maybe although there are lots of potential herbal formulas out there, which we didn't talk about, is why we don't kind of say take this one and that one, because again, it's about you. There are lots of good formulas out there, but you need to be diagnosed and given the correct formula and the correct amounts for it to be optimal. Otherwise, you end up saying, well, it doesn't work. Well, it does work, but it has to be tailored for you.
Right. So in lieu of that, a well-spiced meal, so using all of 6 tastes, meaning For us, it's sweet, sour, salty, bitter, astringent, and I missed one, spicy. Um, those, if you have all of those 6 tastes, the body is going to know what it needs to do. If you have well-cooked, fresh food so that the body doesn't have to work on that, as well as working on the menstrual cycle, because the body always gives priority to the thing that it's screaming for. So it's usually always giving priority to digestion, but when a woman is having her menses, it's also going to give priority there. And so we don't want to have a conflict. So heavy, dense, indigestible foods are going to conflict with appropriate menstrual fluid production and removal of any sort of toxins or impurities that are there.
And that's why I would be talking about soups that have a good rounded set of ingredients. They may contain lotus roots and Chinese yams. There'll be ginger in there too. So there's a rounded set of hot and sweet, and sometimes a little sour. There's this, and greens, plenty of greens in there. Chinese people, of course, eat a lot of warming meats like pork, but not heating meats like beef and lamb. So they often contain meat, which is, is not a vegetarian society, but we can adapt that to the West. But there are often use of common, what I would call kitchen medicine, to support you. And the body, as you're right, takes what it needs, provided it's getting a rounded, because we're always trying to give the majority of the 5 tastes or whatever we call, but obviously it will prioritize. And if we particularly want to dial something up because it might help, we can. And soups and congees, of course, using particular types of grains, not just rice, although that's the common one, but millet, oats, Job's tears, even quinoas and amaranths can all be very helpful grains for us to consume, with possibly some added herbs, spices, and then vegetables. And sometimes they're more savory than they're sweet. Incredibly helpful.
Yes, exactly. Anything that is nourishing, easy to digest. Kanji is for those of you who don't know, it is usually, it's usually some sort of a grain with lots of water in it, and some spices, and they can be sweet, they can be savory. It really depends on the time of year, what's going on, and things like that. Rice generally is the one, but it doesn't have to be. It's like corn chowder, which is something that is here in the West. Corn is the so-called grain, and if you go to other barley soups are really, really excellent. So you can make kanji out of anything, and then add some vegetables. But the idea is that it's easy to digest, and you can modulate the water content or the broth content in. So if you are needing protein, and you absolutely need protein a lot. Pitta women need protein. Women who are menstruating, they may need protein, especially if the ancestors were not vegetarians. So you may want to do the bone broths.
Exactly.
Fine. You want to have good, healthy fats in there as well. So in Ayurveda, we love ghee, or coconut oil if we need to cool things down with. So having all of those things available to the body is going to assist. And then remember that emotions need to flow. And we often live in society, the West, we live in this Protestant type of society where certain emotions are allowed and other emotions are not. And in women, we certainly are not allowed to show much emotion, express much emotion, but that's exactly what is needed because we said rasa, emotions, the flow of emotions is happening at that point in time. So
exactly.
So allowing for the tears to flow. And the more you allow for the tears to flow, what's interesting about the more harsher, the anger, the fear, those tend to dissipate a little bit, if you allow for some of these things to flow, and depression will also lift a little bit.
Yes. And I think that's where I feel personally that the acupressure points are an incredibly gentle way for you to release emotions, lung points here, just below the clavicle. There are lots of liver points that come from the nipple, just a couple of ribs down, and ones in the feet and the ankles. You're releasing emotions when you do those. You'll feel them sometimes. You cry, or you just sort of go, the sighing out is letting go, but without harshness and allowing them to flow. And of course, you're releasing stuff chi by pressing on the points so that you're allowing your emotions to be released. And of course, as I said earlier, they go out through the heavenly water. They join with Jing, a little bit of your essence, and it comes out of your body, and it's a release. So we need to remember that menstruation is a release of everything, the emotional debris that has built up through this month.
Yeah, and let's not discount that it is change, and so the one thing that is most important when we're looking at change, and this is monthly change, weekly change, because the luteal phase is, we're changing month to month. So underpinning it all is what Ayurveda would call dinacharya, which is your daily routine. And there are a number of practices that can take you hours every single day, but we don't have to do that. So the idea is to have some basic fundamental routines, like you're brushing your teeth, you do some other sort of cleansing of the mouth, making sure that you're urinating properly and defecating properly. All of those things throughout the month, if you have practices that allow for you to do that regularly, what that will do is that will create a stable underpinning for your body, so that when changes do happen, it's not too drastic. It's not an extreme. You have a foundation that the body will always come back to.
Yeah. You have anchors in your life that are the things that we do, and that takes us, as always, back to the TCM clock and how we live according to the clock, and the clock flows through the months, and that way we are anchoring ourselves and being able to adapt to change. We have some sort of sense of resilience within the body because we have these anchors.
Exactly. Any other takeaways we want to have here? This was a big, huge topic, and we don't talk about it enough in Ayurveda, in the
West.
In the West. We simply don't, because we're not studying it all that much. We have personal stories, which can often be discounted, but we don't want to discount those. And in order for us to discuss this huge topic, we have to start with like the basics, the generals, right?
Yes,
because absolutely. I don't want someone to say, "Oh, but I heard that ashwagandha is good for PMS." And yes, it could be, but it may not. So,
so it's important, because I think from our perspectives, there's a rich history and rich understanding of these times of year, this time of our monthly cycles, and its importance in our transition from, I'd say lover to mother to mother to wise woman. Not that we're always mothers in the literal sense, but we are in a continuum, and these things are part of that continuum. They're not just things that happen occasionally. It's on our journey. So managing PMS and really being able to see where it fits in the greater picture is a big one. And unlike the West, which called it a psychosomatic disease until recently, that's not how we've ever viewed it.
Right. Along with phantom cramps as you're as you're done. Yeah. So I think the biggest takeaway is to bring it to the forefront, not from necessarily a complaint place, but an honoring place. Okay, so I'm having a symptom or not. You may be living a lifestyle where you don't, and yay. Yay, really honor. Then tell your friends what you're doing. Tell me what you're doing so that I can share it with someone else. But bring it to the forefront. And if someone thinks that you're complaining, you're expressing the history of your life, of your body shifting, and your body preparing for your body just doing its sacred duty, as you call it. It is a sacred thing.
It is, and it is part of being a woman. And we want to, I think, come into deep awareness of our bodies, and in so doing, we become able to heal ourselves in many ways, as much as we on levels where that's necessary, and we're obviously knowing when we can't, as we said earlier, when you seek intervention. But you have tremendous power within you, and I think having this ability to listen to your body puts you in the driver's seat and stops you delegating your health to other people.
I was listening to one of my teachers, Carolyn Mace, who is who was the original medical intuitive, and she did a lot of work with archetypes, and she was talking about the trickster archetype, and it just reminded me. I know I'm going off into field, but my nature. But the trickster archetype is really about when we give our power to someone else and we go unconscious and allow something else or someone else to make decisions on our behalf. And I think that women have been doing that for eons, especially as in terms of PMS, that we've just gone unconscious and it's like, this is the way it is. And no, it's not the way it is.
No.
There are other forces out there and within us that have trained us to go unconscious around it and to just set it aside. So, big takeaway, microplastics. Get rid of them.
Big takeaway. We have a lot of ability to do this, improve our PMS, and some things we can't change because we can't all change society unless we all want to change it together, which is, of course, is what many of us are doing here, one small life at a time.
And that since we are art and heart of menopausing, I think that's what happens with postmenopause is that some of the shackles of being responsible for others start dissipating, and so that's the blessing is that the shackles of being responsible for future procreation or current procreation, it has dissipated. And so, but the more you take care of your system as you're menstruating. If there is PMS, the more you take care of those systems of the reproductive system, so that it's not shouting for attention, the easier those shackles are just going to be removed. And as you hit postmenopause, it won't be so jarring.
Yeah, definitely agree. So we might say PMS is a blessing as much as it is for us to pay attention to our body, to what it needs, to what it's telling us. And in so doing, we set ourselves up for potentially a better perimenopause and menopause, and being able to then really step into elderhood, which we do when we're kind of in our 60s.
Yeah. And if you don't know what to do exactly, both Ayurveda and Chinese medicine can help without hormones. But if you are on hormones, on whether it's birth control or not, we can assist with that as well without interfering.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. We have gone over. Oh my goodness.
We have.
Thank you,
Yes,
everyone.
it was a big topic. It was a big topic. So we thank everyone for joining us. Yes.
And we will see you next week with the latest and greatest, whatever is on top of our minds. Or if you have any suggestions about what you want to hear us talk about and discuss from a Chinese medicine and an Ayurvedic medicine perspective, just let us know. We're here every week.
Indeed. We're back next Thursday.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.